All right, so welcome to this part of what graphic design is. So, a lot of this is going to be background information and, in a lot of ways, explaining what graphic design isn't. So, this is not software related, this is really more theory, and this will tie into some of the material in the midterm, as well as hopefully provide just a bit of context for everything that you design from here on out. So, let's start with what graphic design actually is. Now, here is one possible formal definition, which is a purposeful planning that uses any combination of forms, pictures, words, and meaning to achieve one's goal. Ah, oh God, that's not good. Really, the key thing with graphic design, from my perspective, is its problem solving. Figuring out the most simple thing, like where is this is a bathroom, possibly adding a little humor in, or possibly saving lives. This is actually a photo from a friend of mine when she went to Amsterdam. I love that sign. That looks like a very dangerous pier to be on. So everything has to be designed, or at least most things need to be designed. However, everything that's designed isn't necessarily graphic design, even if it involves having a picture or text. So, for example, this gentleman here, Arthur Holly Compton, back in the day, he was a professor, and one of the things that he designed was the idea of speed bumps. Now, the problem was outside of his office at the school that he worked at, cars were crashing into each other. So he came up with this idea of getting rolled asphalt, like a roll of asphalt, and pushing it down onto the road that would force people to slow down a bit. He is not a graphic design hero. He is actually just a designer. But the actual thing that made this more functional for the average everyday person required a graphic designer that designed this, showing the direction that you're going in and giving a visual indicator that there is some kind of peak. Notice the triangles are just this idea of this is a peak. This is really incredibly elegant and efficient graphic design that was done just by including painting of an upside down V and another little triangle. And that was it. So it took something that was functional and made it much more elegant than signage. Although I never understood speed bump, speed hump, weird. All right, so let's look at other design fields. There's architectural design. This is buildings. Could be things that you're interacting with as far as the environment is concerned. So bridges. Industrial design is normally like a consumer product, like a cup. It could be like a water bottle. It could be a helmet. Could be earmuffs. Could be noise reduction, safety things. There's fashion design. Fashion design, of course, clothing, things that you wear. So now that you know what graphic design really isn't, let's take a look at some of the things that it is. It's way more than Photoshop. So far we've been focusing primarily on software and a little bit of things with design, but for the most part it's been software. That is not what graphic design is. That's just a tool. Graphic design is really the engagement of mental participation. You're making it so that people actually have to interact at a mental level. It's not just physical. So architectural design or industrial design or fashion design is much more on the physical scale. The idea is combining some kind of visual linked in or locked in with typography, so type. When you mix those two things together, you're able to actually produce powerful results. Think about a red circle with a diagonal line through it. Think about how powerful that can be. You could stop a ton of things just with that. Don't walk. Don't turn around. No dogs. Horrible fascists. So there's a lot of power that comes from just that symbol. We have decided as a society that we know what that symbol means, but that was done by having a designer come up with that kind of graphical representation. Looking at signage, same kind of thing. It's very confusing. One of the biggest things as a graphic designer is you're trying to figure out how to take the confusion out of things for people. It's an incredibly powerful, powerful tool. And the simplest form doesn't really draw a lot of attention. But why should you really care? There's a lot of reasons to care about graphic design. For the first part, there's a lot of industrial need for this. Having things and being seen, you have to be able to figure out a way to stand out. So let's take a look at this.
Just this last year, IBM did a study of 1,500 CEOs, and they said that creativity is the most important quality needed today. So why is it that all of a sudden creativity is the most important thing? It is because our culture has evolved into a creative economy. Here are a few reasons why we've evolved into needing aesthetic and conceptual creativity more than ever. First, it is to externally differentiate ourselves from the 30,000 new products that are created each year. Today I read that we have 285 running shoe brands, but in 1970 we had just 5. We have 64 kinds of dental floss, and we used to have just about 12 in 1970. And that can be said for product among product among product. We have product proliferation, so we really need creativity to differentiate ourselves and to create a new artistic element to something. That's where the aesthetics really come into play for these products. It's the aesthetic of creativity and how it creates desire and fit as you compare it to other products. Second, we also need creativity to compete. We are a globally integrated competitive economy. We all have more and more competition each year, especially online on the web and from different locations. I was looking yesterday into sourcing a massage chair from China because I could get it for 40% of the price for the exact same product at one of the stores here. Third, we also needed to reinvent ourselves because standardized products are being produced more and more by machinery and computers because it's cheaper. People are always very expensive in organizations, no matter the type. So the more you can standardize something and have computers create it, the cheaper the production is. And that's why more and more work is shifting that way, and why a lot of our manufacturing products are produced in China. Finally, it's just to survive sometimes. In particular, any service that can be routinized is being pulled to or sourced from the cheapest location. It's at least trending that way. This is why designers are in a good space. You are not doing things that are routinized. You are not doing things that are standardized. And so you're becoming more and more important to our economy. So business needs creative designers of all types because everything is becoming more and more complex. And we are getting more and more stressed. And as a result, we are craving simplicity. Let's jump back to that study I mentioned earlier, the one by those 1,500 CEOs. They not only mentioned that creativity is the most important quality, but they also stated that the primary challenge today is complexity. So logically, as we creatively innovate new products and services that simplify life, in the market they will have more value than things that don't. Fresh Consulting's original name was centered around Occam's razor. Occam's razor is a principle that suggests that if you have a lot of options, often the simplest one is the right one as you think about a solution. So let's come back to this point that simplicity matters because it is valued in our increasingly complex society. What this means is that you as a designer are becoming more and more important to our economy, and you should have more and more confidence in your capability to not only bring the aesthetic side of creativity, but to be conceptually creative as well, to be thinking as problem solvers, because our society needs designers more than ever.
So couldn't really said it better. I like the animation on that as well as just the complex information that's being put across. The idea is we are so bombarded with so much information constantly, and being able to stand out and figure out how to work through that noise is the job of a graphic designer. Now, even though I know most of you are not going to go into graphic design, the idea of understanding how to minimize your message, take something that's complex and make it less complex for people is going to be super valuable. Cutting through all the noise is probably one of the biggest skills that you can gain from a class like this, or at least understanding and being aware that that is an issue. The other thing is being able to stand out, design things for yourself so that you can stand out from other people and be competitive. When you look at look at this. This is at a grocery store, looking at like the aisle for this cereal. There is so much color and information screaming for your attention. That is not easy to work your way through. So somebody had to design all of those things And when you see the solution, it feels really easy. But as you found in working through designing and creating your own collage, you found that it's not as easy as you may think. Looking at something like this, here's a couple subtle things that you may not even notice on this at first glance. This is baby shampoo. One of the key things in baby shampoo, at least a selling point, is that there's no more tears. The idea of getting that in a baby's eyes is something that makes them cry and scream. The shape of the label is in a teardrop. The shape here is a teardrop. The shape here is a teardrop. Those things were purposely designed. That wasn't just by mistake. It's not something that people are going to stop like, oh my gosh, it's a tear. But the thought that was put behind that to reinforce the idea that there are no more tears with this particular brand of baby shampoo is something that was purposeful. Same kind of thing here as far as the hierarchy of text. And what I mean by that is what you see first, second, and third. You got cow milk. It's got the cow spots. The word milk is the largest thing on here. Then less important information is tucked along the side. And the color, the only area of red color is up here where you open it. The reason that's red is because that's pointing out to the customer, this is the spot, not there. This is the spot that you open. So as a designer, not only are you looking for graphics to help sell this on a shelf, and we have, cow milk, we've got almond milk, you've got coconut milk, you got all these things that don't actually have nipples producing milk, kind of scary. But the idea is standing out on a shelf, you see this, that's good old fashioned cow milk. Even something as boring as can labels. Look at how the font here is a larger size, and then it's bolded, and that's thinner. Larger, thinner font. So even here, total carbs, 39 grams of sugar. It's coming from that area. So the idea of organizing this from what do you want people to see first, second, and third, as well as playing around with the weights, is to help communicate. Even on a baseball. Games. The less interesting stuff. Graphics, really cool looking. The color that's used on her dress is pulled up here in the same color for the gradient. The idea of here's the game. This is the part that's most important. Oh, here's less important stuff. Here's really less important stuff. And let's group the stuff that's really useful for the business that's selling the product, but not real interesting to most consumers. That organization is a big part of the designer skill set. And you're coming up with an idea of how are people going to interact with this? Same kind of thing with a remote. You group items together that make sense. You got your volume and the mute right in the same area. You wouldn't have the mute button way down here and the volume up over here. All of the numbers in the same spot. Even something as simple as a book, putting the page numbers in the same spot in a book totally makes sense. Having some kind of running header across the top makes sense. Having the same amount of margin space helps to organize things. Even without words, you're using images to help communicate steps and what to do. All of these things had to have been designed, some of which are less effective than others, like this. Really hard to tell, when am I allowed to park here? It doesn't have to be computer-based. This could be designed by hand. Or it could be done using Illustrator or getting into Photoshop. It can be something super colorful or something black and white. Graphic design sometimes gets a bad name as far as we're just cake decorators. But like I showed you on the brownie video before, if your brownie looks like poop, people aren't going to want to eat it, no matter what kind of ingredients are used in that. Complex information made much more visually interesting. This is an area that is really growing in infographics. These are hard to produce, coming up with what information to put across, but really a lot of people, this is in demand. So last thing I want to show on this one is getting a bigger definition of what creativity is. I cannot tell you how many students I've had in the past that say, I'm just not creative. And I've got to call BS on that, because creativity is not something you're just inherently born with. It's about building up confidence to experiment. But let's take a look at this one.
When you hear the word creative, you might think of a painter, or a playwright, or an author, or a photographer, or a filmmaker, or a chef. In other words, you might think of people who make things. I think it's what we mean when we use a label like creative type. But there's no such thing as creative type. We are all creative, every one of us. We just need a bigger definition of creativity. Yes, creativity involves making things, but it can also mean mashing up ideas in innovative ways. It can mean thinking differently about data and finding unique solutions to practical problems. It can mean hacking systems and tweaking things in unusual ways. It can mean exploring ideas and navigating information until you become an expert curator. It can mean designing systems that empower the creative work of others. It can mean creating change in the world by speaking truth and leading movements and interacting with people. See, each of these creative approaches shape our world in profound ways. And the more we see the creativity all around us, the more we are able to appreciate the creativity inside ourselves.
Creativity comes from being fearless and trying things, become more aware and interested in the way that the world works around you. By using these inspiration boards that I'm having you create is one way towards seeing what else has been done. So the idea of your journey down the road for graphic design is going to be, where do I actually start? The idea for most of this is going to be by reading, watching, and listening to more things, and then experimenting and trying these things out yourself. So that's the first step. I love this quote because it's so absolutely true. When I mentioned before, when you find something that's already been designed, you think, that's easy, I could make that. But starting from scratch is hard. And it totally is. And I get that. And that's why we're going to go through different iterations, meaning versions, and try different things, especially on our next project. But good design really is about making other designers feel like they're idiots because the idea wasn't theirs. There's so many things I see out there that I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so brilliant. And it's the simplest little thing. And the more you can embrace that, the better you will become.